Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Doherty.
And I'm Karen Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next.
Hello, and welcome to the Grief Ladies podcast. I'm Karen here with Kelly, and today we have Gabrielle as our guest, who will be introducing in a moment. We are working through our framework as we always do, and today we are actually going to be doing the letter G for grounding, which is where we talk about those fundamentals when we're talking about how to take care of ourselves physically. One of those very important things that we don't want to overlook, especially the connection that it has to how we are able to cope emotionally through the grieving process. So we always like to start by reading the bio of our guest, just to give you a better idea of who we're going to have with us today. So we have Gabrielle Juliano-Villani. And with our bio here, she is a business mindset coach and consultant who helps therapy practice owners scale, sell, and thrive without burning out. After building and selling her own 7-figure group practice in 2021, she now combines her expertise as a licensed clinical social worker and small business administration coach to help other entrepreneurs create sustainable, profitable businesses. Specializing in supporting practice owners as they navigate Medicare, Medicaid billing, Gabrielle brings a unique blend of clinical expertise and business strategy to her work. She's been featured on NBC News, Spruce Health, and speaks internationally about preventing burnout while building successful practices. So again, Gabrielle, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks so much. I'm so grateful that you're here with us and being able to talk about nervous system, because when we know when we're grieving, everything just feels off. And that's really why we start with the letter G and grounding, because we know we need to get sometimes back to the fundamentals, like
Mhm.
sleeping, eating, moving our body. And because when those things are out of whack, everything feels out of whack. And I was sitting with a grieving client yesterday, and she just said, I just feel like my nervous system is like up here. She's like, I just feel like, she's like, and then I researched something and I saw about regulating your nervous system. And she's like, I need help with that. She's like, what do I need to do? And so I was like, well, interesting you should say that, because tomorrow we're interviewing someone. But we've also heard several people on our podcast bring up polyvagal theory and nervous system. And so I think for our listeners that maybe have listened and maybe not really fully grasp what that means, can you just kind of explain to us what polyvagal theory is and how that maybe interacts with somebody who is grieving?
Yes. And I'm going to do my best to not yap on and on about that and make it digestible and kind of like a high level overview. But polyvagal theory is, to me, the foundation for everything, because every single one of us has a nervous system. And if you're listening to this podcast right now, yours is responding to the sound of my voice and Karen's voice and Kelly's voice. It's responding to the chair that you're sitting in, what you're wearing. So to me, it's like I said, the foundation for everything. So polyvagal theory is a theory developed by a psychiatrist, Dr. Stephen Porges, and he was doing research with newborn babies and rediscovered these two other vagal pathways in our autonomic or automatic nervous system. And this piece of us takes in the information in our environment and then gives us that response. So like when somebody is triggered, right? Or like your client was just saying when they felt like they were up here, that's a nervous system response to what's happening either externally or internally. And polyvagal theory has 3 principles. The first one is that we go through these 3 preset stages called the autonomic hierarchy. And those stages are our ventral vagal, which is like our baseline when you're feeling really good. This is where healing happens. And then, of course, I think everybody's familiar with fight or flight and what that feels like. And when we have some sort of threat of safety or we detect a threat, right, we move into fight or flight. And when our system is completely overloaded and they're like, we can't mobilize anymore, too much stress, we move into freeze, often called collapse or shutdown, which is dorsal vagal. And then the second principle is something called neuroception, that our body has this internal alarm system that is subconsciously scanning our environment for threats and safety, and then having a response to that. And then the third principle is my favorite, which is co regulation. And that just basically means that we need safe people to help regulate us.
Yeah. So
Pretty good,
it's
I feel
Yeah.
like.
yes, you did that very well. I'm impressed. So I think for so many of our clients that are grieving, it's that dorsal vagal. It's in that shutdown, that collapse, where especially in maybe early grief, their loved one has just died. They feel like they can't do anything. They can't get out of bed. They just everything feels exhausting and overwhelming, and nothing feels safe, right? The
Mhm.
people, other people, places, it just feels so overwhelming. And so for somebody who maybe be in that state, what do you do to get back up to ventral vagal?
Well, the first thing that you do, which is everybody's least favorite thing to hear, is that you just need to be, right? Like your body and your system is putting you there, so to speak, to protect you. And so I think, first of all, having that shift of like, this is a protective response instead of feeling like, oh my God, I have to like go and meditate and I have to like do all of these things so I can be back in my ventral and I'm like totally zen. Like, that's not normal either, right? Like, being sad and feeling overwhelmed, I'm going to say normal. It's a normal response to when you have something big happen in your life. So I think that's the first piece. And again, I know people don't like this answer, but that if you can start to shift and have that perception, I think that will allow you to have the compassion for yourself that, like, why am I feeling this way? What's going on right now? And then that can kind of give you more of that insight of like, what do I need to do next? So, one thing that comes up for me that I'll share as well that I do with clients, and I do this on retreats. And this is from Deb Dana. She does the polyvagal ladder. And this is essentially where you just map your nervous system. And so, if you're a therapist listening to this, you can do this with a client, or anybody can do this on their own. And you look at each stage of your nervous system and what that feels like for you. So, obviously, if you're grieving, you probably can't do that right now, right? But the point of this activity is that you can understand what you need when you're in that place. Like for me, I know when I'm in my freeze response that I usually sleep a ton and that I just need extra support because I'm tired. And I know that about myself. I know, for example, if I'm doing like a retreat or I'm speaking on a stage, I'm always really worn out after that. I know that I'm not booking something else right after that. I know that I'm like putting on my jammies and taking off my bra and sitting on the couch in the dark without any stimulation. So a little bit of it is about knowing. And I think when people say, like, how do I get out of this? Especially when you're in freeze, like compassion for yourself, like I just mentioned, and anything really small that you can start to do to make a little bit of a shift. And Deb Dana calls these glimmers, which are just little micro moments of joy, which I think is also important for us to touch on since we're talking about grounding. And especially when you're grieving, the world just feels overwhelming and like there is nothing good. And so if you can give yourself like even 1 second of joy, it makes a huge shift and difference in your nervous system.
Yeah, I love the idea of glimmers, especially with grieving clients, because there's I feel like sometimes when we're grieving, we're kind of like have this narrow focus and we're only focusing on this loss and how it's impacting us and not feeling like the same person anymore and really struggling with like, who am I now? And just even finding just those small glimmers throughout the day. I always encourage my clients to look for those,
Mhm.
like just to know that what we hear a lot of times, I feel this way all the time. Well, is it? It's okay if we have some small little glimmers. It's okay if we have moments of connection or safety, and how can we maybe increase those? What do we need to do?
Yes, exactly. Like the more that you do that, it's like each little stage of your nervous system is like a muscle. So the more that you do things that make you feel good and put you in ventral vagal, that window of tolerance will get bigger and the other windows will start to get a little bit smaller and you'll have more coping skills. So people will say like, oh my God, like really, that one little thing is like going to make a big difference. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't need to be hard. And it doesn't need to be, like I said earlier, right? Like some big, huge self care routine where you're like meditating and you do this and you do that. Like it doesn't need to be that at all. It could just simply be noticing, like, I don't know, I see palm trees outside of my window and I personally love that. So it's like usually my daily glimmer.
Oh, you're talking to two people in the Northeast and it's very cold here, so making us a
So
little
sorry to
jealous.
rub that in.
Well, and I think it's the small moments that are important to uh, talk to people about. I think a lot of times what becomes so overwhelming and what can sometimes put us into this emotional state that we're feeling physically is when everything starts to feel too big. You
Yeah.
know, we kind of have a tendency to think about like our grief and my life and what's happening next. And it's just like this balloon that's getting bigger. So I do try to talk to people about like life is really just made up of a bunch of small moments.
Mhm.
And if we really are trying to scale it down a little bit and focus on those things, and like you said, glimmers, like that has a small moment feel to it, it just feels more attainable and realistic to people, and I think also kind of forces us into the present, which is something that we need a lot of help with this as well. um, do you find that there is a difference with people who may have been prone to these sort of feelings before? Like the word that I think of rather than nervous system as much as maybe like someone, like a word that grievers use with me a lot is anxiety.
Mhm.
And they talk about feeling anxious. And for some people, that's a very new experience, at least at this elevation, and others, that's something they've had, maybe leading up to this.
Mhm.
So, is there a difference in that approach or how that may look for a person once they're grieving?
Are you ready to take the next step on your grief journey with real tools and compassionate guidance? The Grief Ladies are launching a brand new workshop series based on their signature grief G.R.I.E.F framework. 5 trail markers to help you find your footing after your loss: grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. Each workshop focuses on one trail marker, guiding you through practical steps to move from surviving to living again, all in a space that's honest, supportive, and real. Led by grief experts Kelly Doherty and Karen Arnold, these workshops combine decades of experience with tools you can start using today. Visit griefladies.com to explore the upcoming workshops, because you don't have to climb this mountain alone.
I think so, because all of us are unique and all of our nervous systems are unique and all of our experiences are unique that we take in because we don't all live in a vacuum, right? Like, this is kind of a dumb example, but it was the first thing that came to me. Like, you know, for me, if I am walking in a dark parking lot at night by myself, I feel nervous and I'm on edge and I have my keys between my hands, right? So I'm like ready because I'm a woman. But my husband, who is 6'3" and much larger, he doesn't have that experience. He doesn't get scared walking in a dark parking lot, but I do because again, I'm a woman and all of that stuff, right? So the same is for this. Like it's going to be shaped by your own experiences and what you've been through and how your nervous system takes that in and processes it. And it's the same thing even with trauma or with like siblings where they both were in the same household and experienced the same things, but one is having a very different response than the other one. It's because of how it's not what happened, right? It's like how our nervous system is taking that in and storing that.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I think one thing to consider too is for some people, regardless of what it was like before in their grief, depending on how far along they are, some people may still be earlier on where they're still learning to try to manage some of this. But some people maybe have been in this state now for a really prolonged time.
Mhm.
So I think also in some ways it's recognizing changing habits and the way we are, our mindset and our approach to things. I think one thing Kelly and I are really trying to empower people is to recognize what they do have control over.
Mhm.
And your nervous system could almost sort of feel like something that you don't. Like there's certain things that just feels like they're in control of you.
Mhm.
But do you feel like that's an important component to kind of put people back in that power again to be able to do something about how they're feeling?
I do, and, I'm referencing Deb Dana a ton here, but she is like the matriarch of polyvagal theory, and she calls this befriending your nervous system, which I also love that term
Mm.
because it is just about noticing and paying attention to what stage am I in? What is this trying to tell me? And what do I need in this stage? And I do think it's complicated. Even just what you're saying is reminding me of a lot of past clients that I worked with when I had my practice because I saw mostly Medicare clients and a lot of Medicare, Medicaid clients who are on disability and people who have been through so much trauma, so much grief that, happened to them without their control, like not just losing people, but losing their own identity with chronic pain and chronic illness. And just because they've just been living in that like fight, flight, freeze space for so long, that is where they felt comfortable and where they spent a lot of time. And so it is harder, just kind of like with depression, right? It's like a big hole to climb out of. And so it can feel like you are in this deep, dark hole and it's very overwhelming. But like you're saying, life is made up of those small moments. And just like those little small shifts do add up to really big changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the part that, we just really want to keep coming back to is to, help people remember because again, it starts to feel like there's things that you can't do anything about it, and that's a scary feeling on top of everything else. So one thing that you had mentioned in here and we had talked about a little bit before was burnout, which I think can happen with some of this too. And we talk about the passage of time a lot with grief and how there's an expectation that that's going to mean things steadily improve, and yet, for many, that kind of works in the opposite way for a lot of different reasons. I think they come out of the numb and, the numbness and the fog. And, just as things are starting to, become a little bit more clear, friends and family are kind of getting back to normal, expecting you to do the same. And a person who's grieving is carrying a lot on their own. It can feel like for a long time. And so there can be burnout with that. So, again, kind of going back to that long term ideal of this, like, how do we try to prevent people from burning out in grief or in life?
Yeah. Obviously therapy. Like, of course. And, just what you're saying is resonating with me too, because I'm just thinking about like when you were talking about being numb, and that is a big part of it or can be. And then when you do come out of that and you are like really feeling it, you're probably going to feel worse. And then anniversaries or that song that comes on the radio, like there are so many little things that you just don't know that are going to take you to that place. And burnout is complicated too. And of course, that kind of usually lives in more of the freeze place. And so when you're there, again, like the longer you stay there, the harder it's going to be to get out of that space. Oh, there was something else I was going to say about that. Oh, I know what I was going to say. It came to me. So, something that I didn't really talk about too much in the beginning, but is also hugely important with polyvagal theory and our nervous system is it's not just these emotional responses, it's physical responses too. So, when you are in fight or flight, your prefrontal cortex, which is where your executive functioning lives, goes offline and same with freeze, you're thinking more of the back part of your brain, which is more fear and survival. So you're not making great decisions. And when you're in freeze, your endorphins actually raise so that you have a higher pain threshold. Your body temperature goes down, your heart rate goes down. So I just want to mention that because when you are in burnout or if you're in freeze or whatever that looks like, it's not just this emotional stuff, it's also physical. And of course, we know like the physical and emotional bodies are connected, but this is the science behind that. And so I think it's just important to note that this can also lead to long term physical health impacts as well. So, again, if you're feeling burnt out or like you have been carrying this stuff for a long time, it's important to do those small things that move you slowly into ventral vagal, even if it is, again, just like a 30-second, I don't know, petting your dog or whatever that looks like, because the health impacts can be significant too.
If you're looking for a place where you don't have to explain why the days feel different after someone you love has died, we created something for you. The Grief Ladies community is our private, free Facebook group where you can connect with others who get it. It's a space for steady support, real conversations, weekly prompts based on our grief framework, and guided tools you can use at your own pace.
You'll also get early access to workshops, new resources, and behind-the-scene updates from our podcast. If you want a community that's honest, compassionate, and grounded in practical support, come join us. Just search the Grief Ladies community on Facebook. We'd love to have you. You know what? It's making me really think about, there's a book called The Grieving Body by Mary Frances O'Connor, and she really talks about all of the things that happen in our bodies, right? And I was just messaging with a friend. Her mom died a few months ago, and she said, I've been permanently sick since October. And I was like, yep, good old grief in the body, right? You know, we have this increased vulnerability to illness when we're grieving. You see all these things. And I really have to wonder, as we're talking about this, like how much of it is really connected to the nervous system, and why when we're in that, collapse mode for so long, no wonder why we're sick all the time.
Yeah.
And we're, catching every cold. Last year after my dad died, I feel like I'm usually pretty healthy. Last year, I felt like I had a cold constantly. Like it was just one thing after another.
Yeah. And when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, your immune response does go down. And there's lots of inflammation in your body because cortisol and other stress hormones are being dumped into your bloodstream. And I've been through two pretty big rounds of burnout in my life. And the first one is no surprise to anybody. It's when I was working in child protective services and I was so sick. I mean, I remember I had the flu and then I came back to work for a couple of days and then I got a sinus infection and that turned into bronchitis. And I of course didn't have enough sick time to take off. So I was still trying to work from home and yeah, it's because your immune response is down when you're in those stages of your nervous system because it doesn't have the resources and the energy to fight things off.
Yeah. It's really interesting how it's all connected and we don't always see that, right? So I'm curious. I want to switch gears for a moment and curious because you do a lot of sound healing. And Karen and I are both fans of sound healing, and we actually, one of our co-authors in her book does a lot of sound healing, and she's actually done some tracking where clients have experienced after death communications during sound healing. So, and I know this is totally change the topic, but I'm just curious, what has been your experience with offering sound healing to grieving clients? Has there any been, and how do you think it can help them?
It can help because so to get a little bit more sciencey, the muscles in your middle ear are also connected to the cranial nerves, which are connected to your vagus nerve. So sound is extremely powerful. And I think that's another thing we don't really think about, but think about, I know for me, when a motorcycle revs its engine, that is my number one trigger in life. I hate loud noises, right? And I have a response to that. And I also have a response to hearing bird song or the ocean. And you can use in sound healing, this is what we do. We use certain sounds to create dissonance or resonance. And it's one of the easiest, I think, ways to also stimulate your vagus nerve and put you into your parasympathetic state of your nervous system, which is ventral vagal, which is where relaxation happens, where healing happens. And sound healing also changes your brain waves. So obviously, depending on the person and what we're doing and what's happening, but oftentimes we might go into alpha or theta. Theta is that feeling right before you fall asleep. And so your brain waves are really slow there as well. And, when you're in that space, you are more open and you can access other parts of yourself or your intuition or your guides, or you might get messages or downloads depending on your beliefs. And I don't need to go too deep into that unless you want me to, but essentially you're more open to that in that space, because when we are in this space, right? Our brains are online and we're talking and we're not really paying attention to anything else that's going around us because we're not slowed down. So sound healing can do that for you. And I've had lots of people have really big releases who are grieving through sound and like letting things go. I've had people say, like, I went on a journey, I saw a loved one, they came and visited me, this happened. So I'm a big fan and I love it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing, and I think it's really interesting every time that I've experienced sound healing, how different my experience is, and that's what I
Yeah.
love about it.
And that's what's so great about it too, because it is very um, big on intention and also the healer. And, when as the facilitator, we have a very, I mean, it's intuitive, but there is also a specific process of the notes that we're using and the harmonious sounds that we're bringing in at certain times, depending on what we want to achieve. So I love hearing that. That's cool.
And I think it's another great resource for our clients who have, and our listeners who maybe haven't tried something like it, to check out, go to some sound healing, even, even some online. I was listening to one this morning it was a heart opening, and it was just beautiful. Like, it was just so, the Tibetan singing bowls, I felt so wonderful listening to it. And that was just, in my bedroom.
You won't have to leave your house if you don't want to. We have
Ex-
Inst Timer, we have YouTube, like, it's better if you can put headphones on, and if you can't, that's totally fine, and that's another thing that you don't need to lay there for 45 minutes. I personally love that, but if you're new to it, like, you might wanna start with something a little bit shorter, and it's just as helpful and powerful. Um, Even just a few minutes. And I actually have been doing some continuing education training for therapists on integrating sound. And there is tons of research about its effects on grief and anxiety and depression and how it alleviates some of that.
Yeah. There's so many resources and, you know, we maybe haven't had to search for them at, in different parts of our lives, or maybe we've just kind of been going, 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 and we're not thinking about what's out there. I think sometimes I think about this in terms of when we're in a moment that we're really struggling and trying to take care of it in that moment. But then I think there's also like the preventative things that we do maybe each day. Can you sort of briefly speak to like what that would look like? Like if you're in a moment and you feel yourself, things are just escalating and you need to diffuse right in that moment versus a regular practice that someone could do to maybe not get to that state? What could that look like for somebody?
My first answer is one that can be used both ways, and it's another one that pisses people off sometimes, but it is to take a deep breath. So the breath is the fastest way to regulate your nervous system and engage your vagus nerve because it goes right behind your diaphragm. We often don't breathe deeply, we breathe shallowly in our chest. And so when you take a deep breath and your diaphragm expands, it touches your vagus nerve, it lets your body know that you're safe, and that you don't need anything special to do that. Pretty much everybody, I mean, obviously if you have asthma or COPD or something, that might not work, but generally that's a pretty accessible one. And that is also one that the more you do it outside of those times, again, like that window of tolerance, that ventral vagal stage is going to get bigger and bigger the more that you do things that keep you there. So the breath is the easiest one. And of course, you can take it a step further. I really like alternate nostril breathing, but like
Mm.
in the moment, that can be like a little weird sometimes if you're like going like this, depending on what you're doing and where you are. If you're in your car by yourself, it's probably fine. And then I think one of my other like favorite go-tos is I am very tactical. So I usually have something with me. And I think even for grief, this can be nice if you have something that reminds you of a person or a thing or whatever it is that you lost, like a gemstone or a crystal, or like I have tons of fidgets, and like somebody special like gave me this one. So like I just have that with me, and that's like a small glimmer of like, I'm just gonna hold this for a second and bring myself back down. So I love little just small rituals like that you can just easily access. And again, like you don't need any special training to do either one of those things.
Well, and I think that's the most important message is just keeping it available, accessible, realistic. Anything I think that we're talking about here is really available to anybody.
Mhm.
And that's what makes it so effective is that you really don't need anybody else for it. It's something that could be available at any time. Um, And that's sort of, I think, what we hope to be able to pass on, to anybody who's listening.
Mm-hmm. It just small, simple things. That's all you need to do.
Exactly.
Well, and you brought up glimmers again. And what I've been thinking about as we've been talking is, we talk about the now, right? And finding those small glimmers now. But I also think it's about thinking about those glimmers that your loved one did for you. What were those times? What were those moments? What were those little times where you really felt that love with your loved
Yeah.
one? And how can you kind of remember those and also then try to feel them in that moment again? And
Yeah.
so we talk a lot about staying connected to our loved ones, even though they're physically gone. How can we keep that connection? And I think those glimmers are one of those ways to kind of keep that connection, to feel it, like thinking about some of those interactions or those times, a connection, and just allow yourself to feel it and bring it back up is
Yeah.
just, I think it could be very powerful and helpful for somebody.
I think so too. And I love that. And that kind of also reminds me of when, again, I was working with clients and I worked with a lot of older clients, and we would do a lot of life review, which other people would tell me is not therapy, but it is. And that's a lot of what we would talk about, is especially when we're talking about grief and loss. It's like, what are some great memories that you have? And like, how can we explore that and feel that? And, when you are bringing up that imagery and those feelings, like, you feel it. It is like it's here and now as well. And I think, yeah, that's just an important point. So thank you.
Yeah. So we always ask our guests about a segment. It's called Celebrate Their Life, and it's really, my goal is really to help people be able to shift their focus from focusing on the death to the ending, right? Because that's what our brains love to focus on, and be able to focus more on our loved one, to remember those glimmers, to remember those connections to the love that can still remain. And so I think all of us do it in different ways to be able to celebrate our loved one's life. And so I'm just curious. I know your dad has died.
Mhm.
And if you would maybe be able to share a little bit about how you celebrate his life and keep that connection.
Yeah. So I'm really big on signs. And okay, I'm good. So for Christmas, my husband got me a bird buddy. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's a bird feeder that has a camera. And so anytime a bird comes up, you have like a live stream on your phone and you can see the birds. It's like my old lady hobby. And the first bird that visited our little bird feeder, which, by the way, it takes a while because the birds have to feel safe in their own nervous systems. And so we had like the feed or the seed out there for like a couple of weeks. And I was like, maybe they're not coming. It's been like over 2 weeks. Like, maybe I know we have birds here, but like maybe they don't feel safe. And so the first bird that came was a cardinal. And that, a lot of people feel that cardinals are signs of people that have passed, but like the Cardinals were like my dad's favorite team. And so like that always made me think of him. So now I have this beautiful red cardinal that comes to our bird feeder almost every single day. And so I always just reminds me of him.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That got me teary-eyed. And what a
Oh,
thoughtful
Taylor.
gift from your husband. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yes, I mean, we talk a lot about signs on here. We all love signs, and it's about finding what you think that sign is for you and asking for them, right?
Yeah,
You were patient. You had to wait a little bit, but you got it.
I did. And it like, I have all of the push notifications turned off on my phone. Like, I don't want to know when I get an email or anything, but the only ones I have on are for frickin' Bird Buddy. And it was like, a northern cardinal has visited you. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
That's really neat. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it is interesting with signs because I feel like sometimes we get them, but then talk to a lot of people that then will doubt it, and they're like, oh, well, and maybe try to rationalize it. But kind of going back to that idea of the things that can make us feel better in the moment and the importance of allowing ourselves to feel. Because I think sometimes we are feeling so much and it's a lot of like shutting down and trying to like numb some things and push some things aside. And I think there's some lovely things like that can happen. And I know exactly what you're talking about with the bird buddy, and now it really makes me want to get one because we have a lot of birds here. But yeah, and it's just those are glimmers, I mean, the sign itself for sure, but even just, having something like that pop up on your phone that's not, a text from your pharmacy or something, like it's just nice to get something else that's relaxing. Like we're looking for all of those moments. So, one final thing that we really like to do is to send anybody who's listening, home with a tip, something that they can try, something that they can start today. I know we've mentioned a couple of things here, but what is something that you would really like someone to start right away to kind of help with some of this nervous system challenge that they may be having?
I would love if you're listening to this to take more time to pause and notice the glimmers throughout your day. And I know we talked about glimmers a lot, but they really do make a big difference. And like, I think a lot of people think that I am like very whimsical because I am very much like that. And I'm always like, oh, nature and the birds and the little animals. And I'm like, but it makes me happy. So, and and I'll give you some other examples too if you're listening to this and you're like what could that be? Well, like some of mine are like making my coffee in the morning. Like that is a whole ritual for me, even though it doesn't really take that long. I have an espresso, but I'm like the way that it smells and I'm like not looking at my phone. Obviously my bird buddy is like my newest glimmer, but even like again, I talked about like having like a stone or something that you can feel in your hand. Um, there's certain times of the year where when the sun comes through our bedroom window at sunset, it's like really beautiful, even though I can like kind of see all the little dust particles, but I'm like, it's pretty. And I just sit with that for a second. So I would just really encourage people to pause a little bit more. The pause and stillness is truly where magic happens. And that's something that anyone can do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great suggestion. It really is. And as we've talked about with a couple of things here, it's accessible. It's something that's already happening. But again, we can really turn ourselves inwards when we're grieving. And it can be hard to see some of this stuff. So it is about, I guess, leaving ourselves open to that observation and just finding those small moments of comfort because they go a really long way. They really can. So, well, Gabrielle, this is so helpful. I mean, all of this is just really good advice. And I think, again, like we said, things that people can try right away. If someone wanted to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, I'm easy to find because of my name. I think there's really only one of me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. It's Gabrielle Juliano-Villani, and that is my website, GabrielleJulianoVillani.com. On Instagram, I'm at GJV Consulting. And for anything Medicare, Medicaid related, it's Medicare Consulting for Therapists.com.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you shared with us and just for being here with us today. And thank you to everybody who's listening.
Thanks for joining us on the Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.